On March 14, 1963, CBS aired the Twilight Zone episode The Parallel, about an astronaut who returns to Earth to find many things about his world different. Little details that indicate that he has not come home.
It's as if there were another world parallel to mine. As if this world were almost a twin.
On October 6, 1967, NBC aired the Star Trek episode Mirror Mirror, wherein a transporter accident during an ion storm sent 4 of the main characters into a quote-unquote evil universe.
Something parallel. Parallel universe, coexisting with ours on another dimensional plane.
On March 22, 1995, Fox aired the first episode of Sliders. The premise was that a group of individuals traveled to different worlds where history was radically different on each one. Something had happened in the history of that Earth that made it different from our own, and hoped that they might someday make it home.
The same year, the same Earth, only different dimensions.
Parallel universes are a common staple of fiction. Alternate histories of our own world to see how things could have gone, a single choice that could reshape the entire world going one way or another, or even just other realms of existence that house things that we were never meant to know. Comics are no stranger to the idea either. On DC's side of things, the DC multiverse has suffered a lot over the past few decades, originally starting out to explain why there are 2 guys named The Flash, leading into multiple crossovers between characters, and of course eventually heading into many company-wide crossover events. The end result is that the DC universe is frequently rebooted or retconned. The main timeline is forever altered, while the multiverse around it would sometimes be destroyed, restarted, and on and on. Marvel, on the other hand, up until 2015's event comic Secret Wars, maintained that the Marvel Universe itself would never radically alter, but that it did have a full-blown multiverse full of every possibility that could result from people's actions. In 1977, Marvel launched the title What If, a book that explored different outcomes for major storylines and events in Marvel history. Oh, and one time where Marvel creators got superpowers. That happened too. The point is that Marvel loves to explore the possibilities of what else could have happened in their stories. It certainly works as an ongoing anthology, but how about a book that follows around recurring characters as they have to navigate these endless possibilities? Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn, and especially welcome to my retrospective of Exiles, aka Sliders Meets Superheroes. First of all, my apologies to those who were hoping I'd be doing something on the Malibu Comics Exiles or the later all-new Exiles that was published after Marvel bought the company. I know absolutely nothing about those, and sadly will not really be going into that. Instead, the book we're talking about began in 2001, lasting 100 issues in its first volume, and then 2 short-lived follow-up ongoings. The book had apparently been developed when Marvel was trying to make a new What If book, with Judd Winnick eventually landing as the first writer of the series. For reasons I never quite understood, the book is technically an X-Men book, since pretty much all of its members are alternate reality versions of X-Men. With a few exceptions along the way, but we'll get into that later. I'll try to explain some of the context of the characters we'll be meeting, but even I don't know all the details. Part 1 is going to cover the first 61 issues, right up until a major revelation. So let's dig into Exiles, number 1 to 61, and introduce you to the Marvel Multiverse.
Linkara's gonna teach you all a lesson you won't learn. Brodsky, you're not the smartest. Life out, you're not an artist. Anyone who's had a bad comic published, it could be your turn.
Let's meet our first exiles as they appear in the most dignified manner possible, falling screaming from the sky as they land face first into a desert. First up is Blink. Blink is the only character who had appeared, aside from their main universe counterpart, before Exiles. She was a character from the Age of Apocalypse storyline, which I've mentioned once or twice. More or less, Age of Apocalypse was an alternate timeline wherein Professor X's future son went back in time with the intention of assassinating Magneto for some reason, but accidentally killed Xavier instead. Magneto, inspired by Xavier's sacrifice, decided to follow in his footsteps and form the X-Men himself. But because of Xavier's death, Apocalypse began his plans early to, you guessed it, take over the world.
Of course!
Blink was apparently pretty popular, even having a miniseries that served as a prequel to Exiles, but let's leave things there for the time being. Blink is a teleporter, able to also focus the energy of the teleportation into small javelin-shaped objects that she can throw, teleporting an object or person that they hit. So if you're stabbed with one, you're teleported from being alive to being dead! Blink then meets Nocturne, the daughter of her reality's Nightcrawler and the Scarlet Witch. I just realized that when you get right down to it, Exiles is just an excuse to write fanfic characters. Nocturne, like her father, has incredible agility and stamina, but her main powers are in the form of firing hex bolts, as well as, like Teen Titan Jericho, the ability to possess people. Next up is Morph, whom some might know from the X-Men animated series as that funny guy who died in the first episode, and later came back, but that's another story. Although there is a quick bit of explanation with him and his name. When the character was originally introduced in the main Marvel universe, he was known as Changeling, and like so many X-Men, he eventually died in convoluted circumstances. However, when the X-Men animated series wanted to kill off a character for their first outing, they decided to use Changeling. But by that point, the name Changeling was now associated with the Teen Titans character, so they changed it to Morph. You see how I managed to tie in all these retrospectives together somehow? Weird, isn't it? The name carried over when the character was then used in the Age of Apocalypse, although given the makeover of now looking like Observer from Mystery Science Theater. This version isn't from Age of Apocalypse, but he has the look. Morph, as you can figure out from the two names, is a shapeshifter, usually using it to serve as the comic relief. Next up is this big dude, Thunderbird. He's an Apache whose brother actually ended up with more of a starring role. See, the original Thunderbird was created for Giant Size X-Men #1, the book that reintroduced the X-Men in 1975 while adding a bunch of new characters. The problem they had with Thunderbird is that he was the malcontent of the team, the guy who got into arguments and snarked. Except they kind of already had Wolverine for that job, so they decided to kill him off to give a shock moment to the readers. The writers then used his brother to better effect later on. This version, however, is alive, and it's the brother who died. However, in his reality, Apocalypse transformed him against his will into one of his 4 horsemen. You know what's weird? Despite so many of these characters having connections to Apocalypse, none of them ever actually fight an alternate universe Apocalypse. I mean, unless you count all the end of the worlds they deal with, but there you go. Thunderbird's got strength, speed, and stamina. Nice and basic superhero stuff. Fifth up is Mimic, whose powers are a bit on the goofier side. Mimic in the original Marvel Universe is not a mutant, although there's apparently some contention about that, but was the first person to join the X-Men after the original group, and the first non-mutant to join. He could basically copy the powers of anyone close to him and retain those abilities while being away from them for several miles. They weren't as strong as the originals, evidently about half strength, but still pretty dang good. The Exiles version is from a reality where he is definitely a mutant, and the powers are restricted to only being able to copy 5 at a time, meaning he has to swap out the powers of someone else if he wants to add one. This basically makes him a slightly less ridiculous version of Combo Man, but otherwise Mimic in his own reality rose to prominence as eventually becoming the leader of the X-Men and helped make them a prominent force for good and mutant-human relations. Finally, we have Magnus, son of Magneto and Rogue, master of magnetism, but he can't touch anyone without them turning into solid steel, which admittedly means he's one of the few people out there who can stop evildoers with a hug. Magnus is not all that important right now. Who is important is the balding man in the middle of a kitchen that has no walls, in the desert. They ask him what the hell is going on, and he is only too happy to tell them. They're all from different parallel universes, and they've become unstuck in time. Baldy introduces himself as the Time Broker. Time itself is like a living being. It has shape. It has growth. It spends way too much time watching TV on the couch instead of helping me with the kitchen. Imagine time as a massive DNA chain. Trillions and trillions of alternate realities exist along it in strands, and some of these strands are bad, like a cancer. In most cases, these are benign, but on occasion there will be a break in time that will domino across other parallel worlds, altering history radically. In their case, all 6 of them have become undone in time. They're never born, they've become villains, etc. However, they're all here because time is giving them the opportunity to fix all this. They have to go from universe to universe, correcting something that went wrong, and basically untoppling all the dominoes until their own timelines are restored. Okay, so it's actually a mixture of superheroes, sliders, and Quantum Leap. I mean, hell, the Time Broker is basically Al given his fashion sense. If they're successful, they can be returned to their own realities. But they can also die, and if that happens, they'll be put right back into their screwed up timelines. Although logically, if the others in the group are still alive, couldn't they still correct the issues and restore the dead ones to life again anyway? The Time Broker gives them a device called the Talus. It detects what's wrong and gives them a very basic instruction on how to correct things. It's only so helpful, though, since the instructions are somewhat vague, like, save this person, or let this happen, without giving them guides. The Talus is given to Blink so that it'll work along with her teleportation powers. Once they've finished a job, they'll be sent to the next reality. The Time Broker will not be coming with them. I don't exist in the conventional sense. I'm kind of like a living verb. The same with the desert here. It's not a literal place. It and I are constructs created from the collective consciousness of each of you. I'm how your minds are dealing with this trauma. Yes, I see. That is complete and utter bullcrap. I mean, you can be forgiven for not recognizing how nonsensical that is, since, let's face it, this is a superhero comic, so ridiculousness comes with the territory. But no, that makes no sense whatsoever. None of them would be aware of changes in their respective timelines, so how can they be experiencing trauma? And even if time itself is a living thing, and this is not just a metaphor, that doesn't mean time is a sapient thing that can pull them from their own universes and hand them a piece of technology that'll come in handy. And even if they were to buy that time itself was doing this, created from their collective consciousness, why do they have a collective consciousness? Why is the image conjured from their consciousness a short, bald man in a beard with black eyes and their environment a desert? Even for comic book logic, the whole thing just doesn't stand up to scrutiny. And if that was the initial idea, then I really have to applaud them on that, because that's some damn good playing the long game. So that's our high concept situation. They're unstuck in time. If they solve problems, they can go home. And it's time for their first mission. They arrive outside Phoenix, Arizona at night and find a mall, breaking in and getting some new clothes for themselves while also doing research on the internet about this world. The Talus speaks to Blink, no one else can hear it, and explains that in this universe, the world had a zero-tolerance policy for superpowered beings, killing or imprisoning all of them for the last 50 years. And their version of the Marvel Cinematic Universe must be really boring. The Talus says they need to find the one who would lead them, so the Talus can give detailed history about this universe's sociological history, but it can't give a name and address? Man, I hope they fix that in the next patch. Anyway, they reason out that they need to find Charles Xavier, creating a crude version of Cerebro that detects that, indeed, he's alive and imprisoned in Nevada. So in this universe, Xavier took over Molossia. They break into the facility pretty effectively since, well, there are no superpowered beings to stop them, and without people like Reed Richards or the like around, their tech level is not what it should be. They break Xavier out, and that's when the other shoe drops. Xavier reads all their minds and finds out their deal, knocking them all out. See, in this reality, Xavier wants to exterminate all of humanity. Whoops. I'm pretty sure they opened things up like this to play with expectations of readers and remind them that these are different realities. Your preconceptions about these characters need to be thrown aside. Even Professor X is a murderous, genocidal madman in this world. The Exiles realize their screw-up as Xavier starts knocking people out with mind blasts during his walk across America. Realizing the tech holding Xavier at bay was way more advanced than one would expect, they track down the mutant Forge, who in this reality helped imprison and exterminate all other mutants to live a cozier life. After explaining themselves, Forge figures that what the message actually referred to was Magneto. Half the team goes to intercept Xavier and his forces, who plan to cripple the world's economy by murdering everyone in the New York Stock Exchange, while the others go to free Magneto. Unfortunately, they arrive too late. It seems with Xavier freeing people from prisons, the government decided to kill all the prisoners and let God sort them out. So the facility housing Magneto is going to self-destruct with an atomic bomb.
I'm the government, I'm the government, I'm the reason nothing works.
There's no time to collect the others to try to disarm the bomb and free all the prisoners, so Magnus decides to take matters into his own hands. He sends Blink and Nocturne away from the area while he uses his powers to shield everyone from the blast, transporting the prisoners away. Unfortunately, all he can do is contain the blast, and dies in the process. Mimic, meanwhile, kills Xavier when he refuses to change his ways and swears to continue his murderous campaign. So, 1 for 1, at least we're keeping things even. Magnus was clearly killed off so early in the run, much like the original Thunderbird, as a shock moment that sent a message to the readers. There are no main character shields in this series. Anyone can die. In some books, that kind of message can feel like a cheat, since superheroes die and come back all the time, but the thing is that in Exiles, these characters are unique variations from the main Marvel universe. So death does have meaning in this, especially since we are going to get to know these people. Even Magnus, briefly as we had him, we get some character bits about his relationship with Magneto in his own world. It's not much, but you clearly get the idea that this was a character with a history and not just someone disposable, and that his death is a tragedy. Although for the other Exiles, they didn't know him well enough to mourn long. All they could do was tell Magneto and the other prisoners about Magnus' sacrifice and hope for the best. However, the Exiles maintain a roster of 6 people, so before they head off to the next storyline, they're met by Mariko Yoshida. In her reality, the hero Sunfire. She has flight, can shoot energy bolts, although she says that the Time Broker sent her and explained the whole unhinged from time thing, so that should be proof enough that the collective consciousness thing is bullcrap, since that means he was pulled from just her subconscious. Anyway, they move into the next story arc, an alternate reality version of the Trial of the Phoenix, aka the original story where Jean Grey died. Aka where she didn't really die, because X-Men deaths and retcons are a really annoying thing, and Jean Grey in particular has a recurring joke about how many times she supposedly died, even though it's only really like once or twice. Which admittedly still sounds dumb when a character dies for any amount more than once. Exiles is really the series where I have to go, time for backstory! So, here's the deal. The Dark Phoenix Saga is, to many, the X-Men storyline. The definitive, most known, and well-remembered. Long story short, Jean Grey was possessed by the Phoenix Force, a powerful cosmic entity that enhanced her psionic abilities to the extreme. Due to a few events that involve women in lingerie, because comic books, the Phoenix's more destructive instincts go nuts, and she lets loose, eventually destroying an entire inhabited star system. The Shi'ar Empire, along with several other galactic powers, decide that the Phoenix needs to be stopped before she kills anymore, but the X-Men challenge them to a trial by combat over Jean's fate. The X-Men lose, but Jean kills herself to keep the Phoenix at bay. And then, as I said, a lot of it was retconned and made even more complicated, and this is why these retrospectives end up being so damn long. However, that complication is really the central issue of this storyline. See, the Talus says that Jean Grey has to die in this universe. Everyone except Blink is okay with this, because they don't think that's the real Jean Grey, but in this reality, it is. And if she doesn't die, the X-Men win this fight, she survives, and goes on to become a demigod who will wipe out the Milky Way galaxy and eventually the universe. A bit unusual for Marvel, but a regular Tuesday for DC. A lot of the group are reluctant to do this. Like with Xavier, they're having a hard time processing the idea that they may have to hurt and kill someone they care about. Sure, it's not really them, but they look close enough that they might as well be killing them. The group decides that there must be another way. Mimic suggesting they go talk to the X-Men and explain the situation, and the Talus puts an end to that idea quickly, filling them all with visions of what will come to pass if they fail. The death of everyone on Earth, followed by the sun in a mere 9 days. So again, nightmarish visions of the hellscape that will occur if they fail is perfectly fine, but go find Magneto is apparently more than the Talus can handle. After getting themselves ingratiated with the Shi'ar forces, the group gets some time to develop their characters. Mimic and Sunfire bonding over their broken timelines, Thunderbird unable to touch a flower without breaking it, Nocturne wanting to see her dad, and Mimic telling Blink that she needs to be their leader. While Mimic is the one with the most experience, all of them have now faced situations where they're emotionally compromised. Blink comes from a reality very different than the rest, and thus is more easily able to keep herself focused on the task at hand. Mimic even mentions how unbalanced it feels having to have killed the other universe's Xavier. Anyway, the battle goes fairly well, them disabling each X-Man, and then things go south as Dark Phoenix emerges and kills Cyclops. With the help of this universe's Wolverine, they manage to stab Phoenix and end the threat. Man, it's shocking how easily all their problems are solved by stabbing the people they love. Things get a little easier for the team, and less murdery, in their next mission, where they encounter the Hulk, who's being pursued by Canadian superhero team Alpha Flight. Like before, the Talus is unable to give a lot of information other than keep Alpha Flight and the other heroes they've gathered from being killed. Character development once again comes in the downtime, first for Thunderbird as he meets an alternate universe version of himself who's had a few better breaks than him. Apparently both versions of their father were abusive to him. The Exiles version took the verbal harassment to heart and filled him with self-loathing, while this universe version met up with a guy named Shaman who helped him be at peace with himself. He offers advice and help to the guy, but enough about introspection, we've got Blink and Mimic making out. Their relationship, for its ups and downs, would last for most of the book. However, more interestingly to the long term of the book is another group led by Sabretooth, whose mission is to take the Hulk, at least until he sees Blink and recognizes that she's got a Talus. Issue 7 is a done-in-one as part of a non-event Marvel did at the time called Nuff Said, wherein Marvel's creators were challenged to tell an issue without any dialogue balloons. Oh, so that's why Marvel number 3 has all the dialogue just crammed into the side of the pages. Actually, it was more about telling a story without any text, and in this case, the issue explores some of the fears of the Exiles through their dreams. It's your standard stuff. Romantic fears, existential horror, the usual. Issue 8 brings us a montage of their various activities over several months. Some stuff being done fairly quickly, others allowing them to foil a bank robbery in an hour that gave them a week to relax. Afterwards, fighting a version of Spider-Man who was a demon. One more day in that reality is him making a deal with an angel in order to get married. And then the predicament they find themselves in for 3 issues. Prisoners of a Skrull-conquered Earth and forced to fight in gladiatorial battles for the amusement of the populace. Apparently in this world, humanity was conquered a century ago and the place eventually lost any military value. So when superhumans started appearing, their use in combat became a thing. The story begins with the Exiles there for a month, the only ones to have escaped this fate being Blink and Morph. Fortunately, they do not have to do some complicated rescue in order to get them, because pretty soon all the Skrulls leave. In a big hurry. See, they just detected Galactus approaching with his herald, Terrax. Also, Mimic and Blink weren't the only Exiles starting romantic liaisons. Nocturne is pregnant, having gotten together with Thunderbird. Man, custody proceedings are gonna be weird. The Talus's instructions were simply to save the world, so defeating Galactus is definitely the goal there. They come up with several strategies against him thanks to the knowledge the Exiles bring with them, but most of it is for naught. They do manage to weaken him, allowing Thunderbird to sacrifice himself, placing an antimatter bomb on his back that, in one of the few times that has happened to Galactus, he thinks, you know, this planet is really more trouble than it's worth. I'm sure there's a Burger King or something down the street I can eat at instead. Pity none of them are from the main Marvel universe. Then they could have just invented Twinkies to sate Galactus. Thunderbird is basically brain dead, and the Talus seems to think that's enough. Thunderbird is gone.